Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today or for clicking on this recording today. My name is Yadira Ortiz. I'm the Executive Director of Pre-Health Dreamers and working with students who are pursuing health professional programs, including medical school. One of the big questions that we always get is how do we pay for medical school or what financial aid resources are out there for us to be able to move forward in achieving our goals. And we were very excited to be able to meet Randy Chambers from Self Help Credit Union, who has a wonderful resource that we would like to bring into, more out. Into the spotlight and to be able to provide this opportunity for students who are seeking more support. It is a Dreamer Medical Student Loan for students who are pursuing medical school and who are DACA recipients. And I'm excited to learn more today about this. Randy, how are you doing today? And great to see you.
Yadi, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about this. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to the students that you all have done such a wonderful job of supporting over these last few years.
Wonderful. And do you want to tell us a little bit about Self Help Credit
Yeah.
Union and a little bit about this medical student loan that's available?
Yeah, so let me start a little bit about self-help and then I'll talk about the product in specific. So first, Self-Help is a community-based lender. We're a credit union. We actually have two credit unions, one that operates in the southeastern United States, the Carolinas, to Florida, called Self-Help Credit Union, and then Self-Help Federal Credit Union. We're not very creative with naming, which operates in California, the Yakima and Columbia River valleys of Washington, in metropolitan Chicago, and in Milwaukee. And we really have a mission focus in our work. We're a nonprofit organization that is focused on creating and protecting ownership and economic opportunity for all. And we particularly focus on communities of color, women, rural residents, and other folks who have not been well served by our economic and political system. And so that has led us for the last 20 years to do a lot of work in immigrant communities. We've done a bond loan for people who have had to post bond when they've had loved ones who were detained by ICE. In 2012, when President Obama created Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, we quickly developed a loan product that we worked with a number of nonprofits and through our 75 branches across the country to help students apply for DACA in the first place, because we didn't want anybody who had this opportunity to get this deferred action to be limited by their financial resources. So we have a long focus on working in immigrant communities. I think our staff is probably about 40% Latino, and most of those folks are either first or second generation immigrants. We have immigrants from other communities, not as large as in the Latino community. So anyway, so this is really important work for us. And so we've been excited to do this partnership for the last couple of years. So first, I want to talk about the problem, which in some ways is really obvious to you and the folks that you serve. Medical school is the single most expensive training that you can get in this country. And so making it affordable for any family, even families of significant financial means, is a real burden. Obviously, many folks who have DACA status coming from mixed status or undocumented families typically have less financial resources than folks whose parents might be a doctor or an attorney who can help them pay for medical school. So first, our goal is to figure out, how do we make medical school affordable? And the second thing is, how do we make it accessible? One of the real tragedies, I think, of federal policy around education lending is that we do not allow undocumented families. We don't even allow legal permanent residents to get loans for federal students, for federal student loans from the federal government. And since the federal government is the cheapest provider in the marketplace, that really cuts out so many families from being able to pay for their education. And then the second thing is to think about, okay, well, if we've got the federal market is closed to us, what exists in the private market? And as we looked at this, what we saw is that all the for-profit private student lenders, who are the big ones that you would normally see out in the marketplace, often who do big marketing, they tend to charge pretty high interest rates. So for a federal student loan, you're often paying less than 10%. I actually have two daughters in college, and they have including subsidized student loans where they're paying 0% or accruing at 0% while they're in college. So the feds are 0 to 10%. The private student lenders tend to be in the mid to high teens on interest rate, which really matters when you're borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the other thing that we've seen uniformly from the private student lenders is that they require a documented cosigner. By definition, and in fact, they require a citizen cosigner. I actually have met a handful of folks who have DACA status who have a parent who's legally present, and a handful actually who have citizen parents, but it's really not common. You know that better than I do. So the challenges we were trying to figure out as we designed this product is how do we make it affordable, so keep the rate down? And the second thing is how do we make it accessible so that DACA recipients can apply for a loan? So this really started in Chicago. For those of you familiar with the Stritch School of Medicine at Loyola University, I believe they were the first medical school in the country to offer admission to Dreamers. And in the first couple of years of DACA, most Dreamers who went to medical school, I think more of them went to Stritch School of Medicine than any other school in the country because they quickly realized this was an important group of people to be educating. And they had a philosophy that when we got to know them 3-4 years ago was really similar to ours, which is first, we believe in the power of DACA holders to get the education they need and be successful in medical school, complete residency, and be good doctors. And the second thing is we believe that a lot of you will go back into the communities that you come from and provide medical services in the language that people are comfortable, in a culturally aware and sensitive way in those communities. And so that really was consistent with their mission as a Jesuit institution to provide education for kids who are going back into communities, and to provide opportunities for kids who don't often get them from some of the more bigger brand name schools. So they reached out to us and said, hey, we've had this problem since we've started. We've been scrambling to put together financing for our students. They can't get private student loans without a cosigner. It's profoundly stressful to have to find a citizen who's willing to cosign a $100,000 to $250,000 loan who's not your parent. And that's the circumstances for so many Dreamers. We also have a partnership with a nonprofit in Chicago called the Resurrection Project that had actually jumped out on a limb. They never made a loan before, and they made loans to, I think, 8 or 9 students who went to Stritch School of Medicine over a couple of years. And then they called us and said, hey, we don't really know how to make loans. So would Self-Help be interested in stepping into our shoes? So we started with Stritch School of Medicine. We've expanded a little bit in Chicago with a couple other schools. We've done 40 some odd loans over the last couple of years. And now we want to take this national and make sure that any Dreamer who wants to go to medical school, who does not get a free ride, has the ability to borrow at responsible terms and in an accessible way. We've also expanded it to Doctor of Osteopathy, so DO programs, which are very similar in terms of the outcomes that it'll give students the opportunity to go back into their communities, provide good medical attention, particularly in primary care fields where we're under-resourced nationally. So we're excited now that we're able to offer this to pretty much anyone going to medical school anywhere in the country for both MD and DO. So I want to talk a little bit about how it works. So this is pretty straightforward. One of the beautiful things about Self-Help at this stage in this program is we're a small lender. As you saw, we've done like 40 some odd loans over the last couple of years. We have 2 staff members who are our loan officers in Chicago. They sit literally in desks that are side by side. So if you reach out to Sandy or Melitza, they're going to support you. And if one of them is out for the day, the other one can perhaps jump on your loan. If they've got questions, they can talk to each other. And so we're really trying to provide a level of one-on-one service. We're very straightforward. So, we're going to talk to your graduate school directly, and we're going to make sure that they verify, yes, you've been offered enrollment. And 2, here's your financial package, right? So if the total cost of attendance for your medical school this year is $85,000, and you've got $25,000 of support from the school, and you got a private a scholarship, let's say, of another $5,000. So that's 85 total cost of attendance, including including room and board, estimates, tuition, fees, etc. You got $25,000 of school support, $5,000 of private support. It means you need another 55,000, 85 minus 25 minus 5. And so you'd say to self-help, okay, I need to borrow $55,000 a year or 4 years in the most likely scenario. So I need to borrow roughly 55 times 4, I think roughly $220,000 over the next 4 years. So you complete a loan application with us, name, address, date of birth, your ITIN, if you are a cosigner, your social security number, if you're the applicant. The only thing we ask for that we wouldn't ask for on a normal loan application is we want your I-797. It's really important for us that you maintain your DACA status. So we want to see a current DACA I-797 from the feds that show that you're eligible for the program, because ultimately we need you to be able to work when you graduate so that you can provide the services back into your community and earn income as a doctor. We do pull your credit report. We recognize that none of us, myself included, could easily qualify for a $220,000 loan based on our current income, right? You're currently, working, you're planning to go to medical school where you'll be working a lot less, if none at all, so you won't have income. So we're not looking to see, can you pay us back $220,000 based on your current income? But we do want to pull your credit report and make sure there's nothing particularly problematic. It's very uncommon for a DACA holder to perhaps have had a recent bankruptcy, but we look at that. So we are going to underwrite you, which is the term we use for looking at your credit, looking at your history a little bit. But really what we believe is that if you have done the work to get into medical school, and that medical school is willing to offer you admission, we hope in most, if not all cases, they're also willing to offer you financial aid in the form of some kind of scholarship or grant, which is basically their vote of confidence in your potential for success as a medical student and ultimately as a doctor. That's what we're looking towards. We're looking towards that future when you'll be able to perform the really needed services in the community and get paid well enough to pay us back. So we're not looking at how much money did you make last month, how much money are you making this month. We're looking at how much money you're going to make 8 years from now, and have faith that you will pay us back when the time has come. So here's just kind of a quick overview of the loan product. So we do this as a line of credit. And what that means is you don't have to apply for a loan every year with us or twice a year every semester. We're not looking at your credit report every 6 months or every year and saying, we're willing to approve year 1, but we're not so sure about year 2. That's what a lot of the private student lenders do. You have to go back to them year after year. We do is what's called a line of credit. So we would say, hey, we're going to approve you for $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 that you'll be able to borrow as you need it over 4 years. And then you'll draw the funds twice a year. So, if you start school in August 1st, and then there's a second semester that starts January 1st, we'll disperse half of that, in my example, $55,000 to the school on August 1st. They'll apply it against tuition and fees and then provide you with a check for you to cover your living expenses if you're presumably living off campus, which is most common for medical students. And then we'll disperse another half of that $55,000 in January. So all you have to do come back in year 2 is say, I'm still in med school. I'm going back for year 2. I'm going back for year 3. I'm going back for year 4. We verify that with the school. They tell us the dollar amount. Maybe it was 85,000 last year, but it's gone up by 5% because of inflation in year 2. So we might lend you a little bit more in year 2. So we try to make this as painless as possible for the student. We recognize that not everybody does medical school in 4 years. We really hope you do, because it gets you closer to being out in the community and providing the services to your community. But some people take 5 years, so we're willing to lend it to you over 5 years instead of 4. So we then have you pay us back over 15 years, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that works in a subsequent slide. The thing that we have done with this loan that I'm really excited about is we have set our interest rate off of the Grad Plus loan that the federal government offers. So if you look at the federal government loans, there's essentially three types of loans. First, there's the subsidized loan, which is usually a very small amount, say up to $4,000, where the government pays your interest while you're in school. So it's earning 0% interest while you're in school. And then after school, you pay something like 4%. Then they have what's called an unsubsidized loan, where they charge you 4% the entire time while you're in school, even if you're not making payments, which you don't need to be doing, and then 4% after school. Then they have what's called, and that I think is another $4,000 or $5,000. So those two loans don't pay for much. But if you're a U.S. citizen, you get those two loans first. Then if you need more money, you apply for what there is called their plus loan. We'd love to be able to price at their lower loan rates, but we're not the federal government. We don't have the power of Congress to tax people and raise money essentially for free. And so we've benchmarked our rate, which means we've literally tied it to that grad plus loan rate. And the reason I want to describe that is that rate does change every year. The good news is that when you apply for a loan with us, we lock in your rate for all 4 years. So you see on here, the rate's roughly 7.9% right now. That means if you borrow from self-help in the month of June of 2023, you'll be paying 7.9% on the money we disperse to you this summer for year one, the money we disperse to you a year from now for year two, so on and so forth, even if interest rates go up. It does mean that we change that rate every year. So, and the feds typically change it around July. So if you apply with us in July or August, the rate is going to be different than what it is today, but it'll be the same thing. We're going to set our rate when the feds reset their grad loan plus rate for the next 12 months, and all new loans. So students who apply with us in September or who come to us next January when they're planning to go to medical school for the first time, or they only hear about us. Unfortunately, they got a loan from the private sector for this year, and then they see this webinar on a recording 9 months from now and say, hey, can I refinance the loan that I took out with fill in the blank private lender? We'd say, yeah, but you got to take out at the rate that we're offering next January, next February. The two other things that I think are really important is when you pay us back. So we recognize that medical students don't make a lot of money, and as medical school gets more intense in years 2, 3, and 4, it's often very difficult to even hold a second job, which I know many of you have done while you were getting your college educations and maybe even earlier. You worked your way through college. It becomes hard when you're in medical school to hold a second job. And then in residency, we actually don't pay residents all that well. So our requirement is that you start paying us back when you become a practicing physician. So not when you graduate from medical school, but when you complete your residency. And we give you up to 6 months saying, hey, I completed my residency, 8 years from now. I'm not going to start my job until October. I want to take some time off before I start, or I've got to move, or it took me a few months to interview and find my placement. So we're going to be there when it's time for you to start really practicing medicine, is when you have to pay us back. We do really encourage students to pay a portion of their loan at any time, particularly interest. So if you think about this, I'll just give an illustrative example. If you borrow $100,000 at 7.9% today, it means, and you don't pay us anything for the next year, it means that over the next year, we're going to charge 7.912% of $100,000. So about $7,900 this year on your loan amount. So at the end of this year, you'll owe us $108,000. And let's just say your school called you at the end of your first year and said, you were such a spectacular student. You were first in your class in your first year. We're so proud of you. We're going to give you a free ride for the next 3 years. So you don't borrow any more money. If you don't make any payments in year 2, we're going to charge 7.9% on top of the $108,000. And that's going to take it to maybe $117,000 a year from now, and so on and so forth. So even if you borrowed $100,000 in year 1 and made no payments for 4 years of medical school and 4 years of residency, at the end of that 8-year period, you're going to owe us something like $200,000, and then you're going to have to pay that back over 15 years. That's totally fine. We're prepared for that. We anticipate that. We think about your future income and say, can this student afford this? She's planning to be a pediatrician. How much does the average pediatrician make? if she has to pay us back $200,000, can she afford to? And the answer is almost always yes. But if you could say, you know, when I'm in medical school, I'm going to send $50 to self-help every month. The interest is 7.9% divided by 12. I think that's $600 or $700 a month. I'm just going to send them $50 a month for the years that I'm in medical school to pay some of the interest. And then when I get to residency, I'm going to pay all the interest, but none of the what's called the principal, the amount we've loaned to you, so that at least it doesn't continue to add up over time. So we really encourage students to think about what is the best outcome for them, not just in the short term and the long term. Just to be clear, we only require that you pay us back anything when you finish your residency, but we really encourage you to think about how can I minimize the amount of debt that I take on long term by paying some of it short term. So three quick things. The first one is the most important on this. We require a cosigner. The reason we do that is we do not expect your parent or sister or uncle to pay us back. We expect you to pay us back because you're the one going to medical school. You're the one signing that you're going to promise to pay us back. And you're the one who has the income opportunity that comes with being a doctor to be well paid. So we're really looking for you to pay us back. But we do want somebody to remind you, hey, remember back in 2023 when you started medical school and I co-signed for that loan? How much do you owe now? Here it's 2031 and you're practicing medicine. And remind me, how much is that are you making this year? Oh, $210,000 a year as a first year doctor. Remember, I don't have that kind of money, son, daughter, niece, sister, brother. But I signed on that loan and promised that I would hold you accountable to pay it back. So we're really looking for a level of a family support system. But I think the thing that I'm really pleased we're able to do is we don't care about the documentation status of your cosigner. We do want them to social or an ITIN because that allows us to look and report to a credit bureau that they are a cosigner. So it shows up on their credit record. That can sometimes be helpful for folks who have limited credit histories to show on their credit record that they're a cosigner for a loan. But we are not looking at mom or dad's income and saying whatever they do is how we expect to get paid back. It's not their responsibility to pay us back. It's yours. But they are co-signing the loan, which means if you don't make that first payment 8.5 years from now, we're going to call them and say, hey, we haven't heard from Yadi. You're a co-signer on this loan. You need to help us track her down. So it's really to have a family accountability mechanism. As I mentioned, we disperse funds twice a year, beginning of first essentially semester, if that's the term you use in medical school, and second semester. And then the thing is, we disperse the money to the university. So they tell us, in my example, you've got $85,000 total cost. You can borrow up to 55. Sometimes you say, no, I got $5,000 of savings. Only send me 50. That's fine. But we're going to disperse that 50 or that 55 to the school. They'll pay themselves and then send you the remaining money. So I touched upon this a little bit, but I want to just reemphasize it. We don't require payments during medical school or residency, but we do encourage you to pay what you can during that time period. We may explore in the future about requiring interest payments during residency, but we felt like during these first few years, we wanted to make sure that we could get the program off the ground and learn a little bit about how that has worked as students head towards residency. We do require payment in full starting after you finish residency or 5 years after medical school, whichever comes first. I know there are a handful of specialty careers that require a longer than 5-year residency, but we feel like if we're making a loan commitment today, we don't want to go more than 9 or 10 years before we start getting paid back because there just becomes a lot more uncertainty in a normal circumstance. And then whatever you owe at the end of your residency, when you start paying us, which is typically 6 months post-residency, we need to get paid completely off over the next 15 years. So we will set up a standard payment, whatever is the amount you owe, we'll do what's called an amortization, which is a calculation of how much payment you have to make over 15 years to pay all the principal and interest on that loan, which is what really all lenders do. So that's the main summary of the program. I just want to show you, this is a little snippet of the website that we've set up for this product. So if you go to selfhelpfcu.org and then you see there's a little caret next to personal. If you drop down on that caret, you'll see our Dreamer Medical School loan that will take you to the page that you see in front of you here. That will help you get more information. As I said earlier, one of the things I'm pleased most about this is that our goal is really to provide hands-on support. This is a scary experience for students to borrow this kind of money, to think that long term that I might not even start paying this thing until I'm 34 years old. So we want to be there to support you, which is why we've got this really wonderful team of 2 loan officers. We picked 2 of our strongest, most experienced loan officers to work on this, and they will be in direct contact both with you and the school as you go through this process. Our commitment is really to do this well. My goal is that every single dreamer who goes to medical school who does not get a full ride is able to borrow from us if they need to. We also ask the schools to make some contribution. I don't think it's particularly fair for a school to say, yeah, we're happy to educate you, but we're going to charge you $100,000 a year and it's all on you to borrow that for 4 years. That's not the financial circumstances of almost anybody who looks at this webinar. You don't have those kind of family resources. So we often do call schools when a student says, hey, I've been admitted to such and such medical school. I heard about your program. I say, can you introduce me to the admissions officer or the financial aid officer at your school? Because I want to make sure they're supporting you. So we try to have that level of one-on-one engagement, not with just students, with schools. So Yadi, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn the mic back to you. I know you had some questions that you wanted to ask me.
Yes, thank you, Randy, for just kind of the overview of the program and just for all the information that you provided and for the support that Self-Help is providing. I think that this is a really great opportunity for folks. I do have a little bit, can I get a little bit of clarification? Because I know probably, I think it's really important as we're talking with schools, I know there's going to be probably administrators that are going to have questions. And I know you require like kind of the schools to kind of also support the students. Is there a specific percentage that Self-Help is looking for from the schools so that they kind of keep that in mind when their students come to them and say, hey, I got this loan from Self-Help, but they need you to also prove that you're supporting in order for me to be approved for it?
That's a great question. We thought we had a formula, but then as we learned, schools have really different cost structures, particularly, some of the wealthier schools, have more bigger endowments and can make larger grants. Some of the public universities often have very small endowments, and then they've got in-state, out-of-state. So we've ended up doing that on a kind of a school by school basis. I guess what I would like to see is generally we really can't have the students borrowing needs be more than 75,000 a year because we're only going to lend 300,000, which is 75 times 4. So for a school that costs 85, 90, $100,000, which many of them do, that really means that the school needs to come up with somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000. I would say in what I've been learning as we've been going through this, talking to schools, is out-of-state publics are often more expensive than private schools. So really encourage students to look at schools in their states because the in-state tuition is so much lower. So we can ask for, sometimes in-state total cost of attendance instead of being 100,000, what it is for out-of-state might be 65. And then a public university that doesn't have a big endowment, some do, not all, but some do, might only be able to offer 10,000. But if you start at 65 or 70, 10,000 is a really nice number because it takes total cost down to that you have to borrow to maybe 60 or 65. Whereas you start at 100 and you provide 10, it still doesn't work. So I wish we could come up with a formula, but we're really looking to get for the school to contribute probably somewhere between 15 to 25,000 and to get the total cost well on $75,000 really max. I'm sorry, not total cost, total amount that student would have to borrow.
No, I think that helps, and thank you for clarifying that. And also, I know you're talking a little bit about the co-signers. Does the loan hit their credit score right away? Does it affect them in a positive way, in a negative way? What kind of things should students what kind of conversations should students have with parents in regards to that?
So it's actually a hard question to answer that I don't have a clear answer for, because the way credit scores are calculated is a bit of a black box. My understanding is for people who have limited credit. So if your parent has no credit and they co-sign for the loan, it's likely to help their credit score a little bit because it shows that they have a credit history. I would also say that it's something that the student needs to think about. So for example, we just had a conversation today about a student whose total borrowing needs are less than $50,000 a year for 4 years. So 50 times 4 means 200,000. So his total borrowing needs over 4 years are going to be less than 200,000. And the loan officer and I were just chatting before this call. Should he only apply for 200,000, or should he apply for the full 300,000? Because we don't have to disperse or give you all the money that you apply for. We're only going to disperse the amount you actually need. And what at least she and I came to the conclusion was is it's probably better for him in that instance where he's going to be borrowing under 50,000 per year. So if it's right at 50, we need to lend more than 200. But if he's going to be borrowing 35 to 40, we would approve him for 200. I say that is because he might find 2 years from now he needs to buy a car to replace whatever he has if it breaks down, or because he's now, doing intern rotations at a hospital that's 25 miles away. It'd be best if he could buy that car for cash, but that's not always easy. So my guess is if he's borrowed 200,000 from us on a line of credit, he's more likely to get approved for an $8,000 car loan than if he's borrowed 300,000. So I'm giving you an indirect answer because I think it is case by case. But that's certainly something that'd be a good conversation to have with Melissa or Sandy, what their experience is on co-signers. How does that impact their credit report?
No, thank you. That helps, Randy, because I know a lot of times our students kind of bring that up to our attention and they're really nervous. And so I think it really helps to kind of ease a little bit what you've just kind of shared with us. I've also heard from some students on regarding to residency. What if they don't match with residency once they
Yeah.
finish medical school, or what if they take a leave of absence? Or what if they can't make the payments after 6 months? Like, what if something does happen? How does
Yeah.
that affect them?
I mean, I would say I'm going to be both bad cop and good cop. So we're lending a lot of money to students, and if students can't pay us back, the program can't, exist, right? Our business is literally a business where we lend out money that our depositors have put with us, and we need to be able to get that paid back so we can provide the money back to our depositors and we're a nonprofit, but we still have to keep our doors open. So our expectation is that people make a strong commitment. You shouldn't borrow money that you don't have the intent to pay back. And we've never made a loan to someone who didn't intend to pay it back, but life happens, right? We all go through this. We can face, daily circumstances where, I'm married and my spouse loses their job. And she was helping me pay that back, right? That happens. We also can face really dark circumstances, right? The loss of a loved one, the loss of an income earner. In the case of a dreamer, it could be the deportation of a parent. So you're dealing with circumstances that
Mm.
can really impact your day-to-day life. So I would say on the good cop side, we're going to work with students. So what we ask you to do is be proactive with us, right? We're not we're not here to take advantage of folks, and we're not going to come hunt you down. But we want you to call us and say, hey, I've had a life event, the kind that I just described, or something that I haven't anticipated. I'm going to need to take a year off. I finished 2 years of medical school. I plan to come back for my third year, but I'm going to take a year off. I need to go back to work in whatever my job was before, or find a job and earn some income to support set family circumstances where a parent was able to support and their income's not there anymore. Call us. We're going to work with you. And again, we'll do that on an individualized basis. For some folks, I'm taking a semester off. I have a kid who's taking a semester off from college. And so, figuring out what that circumstance is, versus, I failed out of medical school. I'm 3 years in. I'm going to be going to a job that makes whatever that is, 20% of what a doctor makes. I know all you all $160,000. This is a big number. I'm terrified. Call us. We're going to work with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then also, I know they're very limited. Um, based on, especially through state, but I know with Pre-Health Dreamers, we have learned of some state repayment programs where the student practices in an underserved community that's part of that repayment program. They can definitely apply either their state such. Are you guys linked to any of those programs, or are you familiar with them?
We're familiar with them. We actually have not had anybody start their medical career yet. Our first group of these are actually loans that I mentioned earlier that our friends at the Resurrection Project had made. A handful of those students are finishing residency literally pretty much as we speak, this month. And so they'll be starting their medical careers by the end of this year. So those are going to be the first ones who actually are now in the position where they have to start paying us back. We will absolutely unequivocally work with folks like that. I mean, we've actually made loans for federally qualified health clinics, a branch here in North Carolina where I'm based. We're building in Raleigh, our state capital, in the same project as a federally qualified health clinic. That we'd love to have students do that when they finish med school and residency, and go back into what is essentially public service medicine. So the answer is no, we've never worked with those, and yes, we will and are excited. From a financial perspective, we want to get paid back. And from a mission perspective, we want the students to be successful in their communities, to be enriched by the medical services they provide. So in some ways, those are like the perfect marriage is someone who actually does public service work and then actually has the government helping them pay back their debts.
Yeah, and I think I keep encouraging advisors and students to look into their state. I know California has a few.
Yeah.
Actually, a law that was passed that opens up state repayment programs for students, even if they don't have a social security number. So I encourage students, even if you're not in California, to look into your state. Advocates are constantly having these conversations.
Yeah.
So even if it doesn't exist now, it doesn't mean that it won't exist in a year or two. So just continue to look for these state repayment programs in your area, and hopefully you'll be able to, apply for one of these that can help you pay your medical school loans, because I know that that's often really nerve-wracking for students, but there are resources. And thank you, Randy, for just sharing that. Folks can really be proactive if they see kind of a little red flag coming their way of they have to leave school, or they have to take some time off, or just life happens. It's great that they can just call and work with your team and have those conversations. I think that works well, especially like also if students are applying to medical school, they're going to be starting and they're a little bit nervous of, is that funding going to come our way? I know, Randy, you've already said that you guys work and talk with the schools so that they know that that funding is coming also for the students. So it's really great that you guys are having really great open communication, not just with the students, but also with the schools.
Yeah, no, it's been a learning experience, and I will say, the advantage of being small is that we can really provide a level of one-on-one support to students and schools. The hard part is that we're doing this one-on-one, right? So we don't yet have a formula. For example, we don't yet really have an online portal for loan applications. We've been working very hard on that. Our hope is that we will have it for the next cohort of kids, the folks going to school a year from now. So we're kind of building it as we go, but we recognize that, dreamers aren't getting younger, right? The prime age really for someone right now is kind of the age when people are going to graduate school. And if we waited until we had a perfect system in place a year or two for now, we'd miss out on students. So I will say we're not perfect. You're going to have to be patient with us. We do say to the medical schools, we're going to send you a check or a wire. We don't really have, if we were able to get this online system built, we'd have essentially electronic connections to the financial aid offices, which is probably what about 85% of the loans that they are processing have these electronic connections and are done online. So far, we haven't had a single school say, sorry, we don't know what a paper check looks like, or we don't accept wires. So far it's worked well, but it has meant a level of like, we need to talk to the director of financial aid, or if it's a big school, the assistant director of financial aid. We need to talk to the bursar's office, which are the people who actually process the payment, and say, want to make sure you're okay with us doing this work manually. So we will acknowledge that we will make mistakes along the way, but we're really committed to learning from those mistakes. We've got two really smart folks working on this, and we're going to work with students, and we'll learn on this together.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for all the information. And, before we close up, or do you want to close us off? Thank you for bringing this. Are there any next steps for students, advisors, schools that you want to provide?
So I would say for students, when you get to that webpage, the selfhelpfcu.org, and then click on personal and then click on Dreamer Medical Student Loan on the drop down, you'll see there's a contact us form. We really encourage you to do that. Reach out to us. Particularly as we encounter new schools, we often need your help. I think in almost every instance, the student has said, yes, I've spoken to someone in the admissions office. Let me give you her or his contact information. So that would be my encouragement for students. For schools, I'm going to get a little bit on my soapbox. I'd like every medical school in America to accept Dreamers. I'd like them to accept anybody. I think that these are going to be incredibly successful students who are going to enrich your schools and enrich the communities we serve. And I really encourage you to provide them with financial aid, because I do think it's wonderful to offer admission, but we are all walking through this together, and to have the financial commitment of the school to say, we're not just providing you with an education, but we're actually placing a bet on your success with our own money, I think is really an important thing to say to the students. To us, it matters, but to the students, it makes a big difference, because as you said, it's terrifying applying for this amount of debt. We're all raised to recognize that debt is generally not a good thing, but there's no other way to pay for medical school. So we really encourage the schools to be there, and we'd love to have them reach out to us. I've had a number of schools call me, say they heard about this, particularly from Loyola. Or from another school, or they had a student who called them who's been admitted to 2 different schools and wants to, recognizes that she or he needs debt. So anyway, we'd love to talk to students and to schools, and we're excited about this. So really appreciate the time that you've given me today and for the work that you all do, because in some ways, there's not an easy way to get the word out to the community of students that we want to serve. So having Pre-Health Dreamers and other networks of students and dreamers is really the best way that we can help reach the students who need us.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for this information and for this resource. And thank you to the Self Help team for everything that you guys are doing.
You're welcome, and we appreciate the time and the partnership.